It's 7:43 in the morning. You've said put your shoes on 3 times. The cereal bowl is still on the table, the backpack is still on the floor, and your child is standing in the hallway doing absolutely nothing, and something inside you just snaps. Your voice rises. You say things louder than you mean to, sharper than you want to. And then the morning continues. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a quieter voice follows you to work, follows you through the day. What is this doing to them? If that moment feels familiar, you are not alone. Most parents have been there. Most parents carry that question. And the fact that you're asking it right now says more about who you are as a parent than any single moment of raised voices ever could. Here's what most parents don't know, though, and this changes everything. When you yell, your child isn't choosing to be unaffected. Their brain is actually going offline, not as a behavior strategy, not as manipulation, literally, neurologically, offline. The prefrontal cortex, that's the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, language processing, and emotional regulation, essentially loses connection with the rest of the system under sudden, high-volume stress. Research in developmental neuroscience confirms that children's brains are exquisitely sensitive to vocal tone and emotional intensity, far more than adult brains are, because they're still being built. This means your child, in that moment, physically cannot think clearly, respond calmly, or process what you're saying, no matter how reasonable your words are. And here's the part that matters most. Understanding this isn't about excusing the yell. It's about understanding what's actually happening in that small developing brain, so you can make sense of what chronic stress does over time. Let's start with what happens in the body first. Every time a child experiences a sudden, frightening sound, including a raised, angry parental voice, the brain triggers a cortisol release. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone, and in small doses, it's completely normal and healthy. But in children who experience frequent yelling, cortisol levels can become chronically elevated. A 2014 study published in the Journal of Child Development found that parental verbal aggression, including yelling, was associated with significantly higher baseline cortisol levels in children over time. What does that mean practically? A child living in a high cortisol environment is operating in a state of low-grade biological alertness. Their nervous system is spending energy on survival readiness rather than on learning, creativity, or emotional openness. You've probably noticed this. A child who seems edgy, reactive, or quick to cry over small things. Sometimes that isn't a personality trait. Sometimes that's a stress hormone pattern the body has learned to maintain. The second thing that happens is subtler and in some ways more lasting. The brain is an anticipation machine. It learns from repeated experience and builds predictions about what the world will feel like. When yelling happens frequently, the brain, specifically the limbic system, which processes emotion and memory, begins to encode a particular emotional signature for home, for meal times, for homework time, for mornings, not consciously, not as a decision, but as a felt sense, an expectation. This place, this time, this person. There may be danger here. Research from the University of Pittsburgh found that children regularly exposed to harsh verbal discipline showed changes in the way they processed emotional information, becoming more attuned to threat cues and less attuned to neutral or positive signals. Think about what that means for a child walking into the kitchen in the morning. Before a single word is spoken, their brain may already be scanning for threat, and a brain in threat detection mode is not a brain that can easily cooperate, focus, or connect. The third area that science points to is amygdala reactivity. The amygdala is sometimes called the brain's smoke alarm. It's the structure responsible for detecting danger and triggering a fear response. In children who grow up in consistently calm environments, the amygdala learns appropriate calibration. It fires when there's real danger, and it settles when things are safe. But chronic exposure to unpredictable anger, to yelling that seems to arrive suddenly without warning, can cause the amygdala to become hyperreactive. It starts seeing danger where there isn't any. Small corrections start to feel threatening. A firm tone starts to feel like an attack. This is why some children seem impossibly sensitive, why they dissolve in tears over what feels like nothing. Their smoke alarm has been recalibrated by repeated false fires. And this isn't a character flaw. This is neuroscience. This is their brain protecting them the only way it knows how. Fourth, and this one is worth sitting with, frequent yelling affects the attachment bond. Attachment isn't just an emotional concept. It has a biological architecture. Children are wired to seek their parents as a safe base, the secure platform from which they explore the world. When a parent becomes a source of fear, even occasionally, even temporarily, the brain faces a biological conflict it isn't designed to resolve easily. Researchers call this fright without solution. The person you need for safety is also the source of threat. Over time, children in this pattern can develop what attachment researchers describe as disorganized responses, difficulty trusting, difficulty seeking help, difficulty regulating emotion in relationships later in life. This doesn't mean one bad morning breaks your bond. It absolutely does not. Attachment is resilient, and it is built across thousands of small moments, but it does mean that the emotional climate of a home shapes a child's internal map of relationships in ways that extend far beyond childhood. Now here's the point that may matter most of all, and it's the one that often gets left out of conversations like this. The yell itself is not the whole story. What happens after? That's where some of the most powerful science lives. Research on rupture and repair in parent-child relationships consistently shows that it's not the absence of conflict that builds emotional security. It's the presence of genuine repair. When a parent comes back after a hard moment, gets down to their child's eye level, speaks softly, says, "I got too loud and I'm sorry, that wasn't okay," something meaningful happens in the child's brain. The nervous system learns. Ruptures can be survived. Relationships can recover. Adults can be wrong and still be trustworthy. That is not a small lesson. That is one of the most important things a human being can internalize. A 2016 study in the journal Child Development found that children whose parents consistently repaired after conflict showed stronger emotional regulation skills than children who experienced either no conflict or conflict without repair. The repair is the medicine, and you have access to it every single time. So here's what all of this means, not as a verdict on who you are, but as a map for where to go. Frequent yelling creates real patterns in developing brains, elevated stress hormones, threat-biased emotional learning, a more reactive alarm system, and strain on the felt sense of safety that children need to thrive. These are not permanent sentences. They are patterns that began in response to environment, which means they can shift in response to environment. Children's brains are staggeringly plastic, especially in early and middle childhood. They respond to change. They respond to consistency. They respond to repair. When you begin to lower the temperature, not perfectly, not all at once, but genuinely and over time, something shifts. The nervous system gets new data. The anticipation of threat starts to soften. The mornings start to feel different, not because you became someone else, but because the emotional climate of your home changed. And your child's brain, doing exactly what it was designed to do, will begin to reorganize around that new information. You are not a bad parent for having a voice that has gotten too loud. You are a human being under pressure, doing one of the hardest jobs that exists, often without enough sleep or support or acknowledgement. The goal was never perfection. The goal is a general direction: warmer, calmer, more repaired. and the willingness to take one more small step toward it. Which of these 5 areas resonated most with you? Share this with a parent who might need to hear it tonight.